Hello again. In this video, we are going to be learning how to use a standard algorithm and the reciprocal to divide fractions. Dividing fractions. You can use a reciprocal to divide fractions. A reciprocal is one of two numbers whose product is 1. It is the result of flipping a fraction over. So for example, 3/4, its reciprocal will be 4/3. All we do is exchange the numerator and the denominator. They switch places. We flip the fraction over. In 2, remember 2 is a whole number, and that means it's really like 2/1. When we get its reciprocal, it becomes 1/2. Now it's your turn to try. You try this time, and do me a favor and pause the video in between each question, try it yourself, and then come back to see if you got it right. So if the fraction is 2/3, its reciprocal will be 3/2. Remember to pause the video. We're going to find the reciprocal of 3/13, and its reciprocal will simply be 13/3. We exchange the numerator and the denominator. In this case, we're trying to find the reciprocal of 9/10. Its reciprocal is 10/9. In this you-try problem, we have a mixed number. So before we can actually find a reciprocal, we need to change it into an improper fraction. So I'm going to account for the 4 wholes by putting 4 whole circles, completed circles that are completely filled in. We have to account for the 3/8, so there are 3 more pieces that are filled in when I would need 8 to make another whole. Now to find out what it is as an improper fraction, we simply count the yellow pieces. So in this circle there are 8, and another 8, and another 8, and another 8. And 8 times 4 is 32. And then we have 3 more pieces that are left over. That represents the numerator of the fractional piece. So the 32 pieces we had in our 4 wholes added to the 3 pieces that we have in our extra pieces will give me 35 pieces when I needed 8 to make a whole. Notice that the denominator does not change because in each case I still need 8 pieces to make a whole. Let's try finding the reciprocal here. If the fraction is 35/8 now, because now we've changed our improper fraction our mixed number into an improper fraction, now we can find its reciprocal simply by turning it over. All right, now we need to find the reciprocal for the number 5. Well, 5 isn't a fraction yet. So first let's make it into a fraction. And remember, we can do that by putting 5/1. Any whole number can be made into a fraction by putting it over 1. So now we have 5/1, and that means that its reciprocal will be 1/5. Dividing fractions using an algorithm. You can use the following algorithm to divide fractions. If you're doing the example 4/5 divided by 2/3, let's take a look. K, that means a C and F. K is keep, C is change, F is flip. So let's take a look at those and look at the color coding. First, we're going to keep the first fraction. That's 4/5. It's red, just like the K in keep. Then we're going to change from division into multiplication. So that's the green little dot. Remember that a dot is another way to represent multiplication. And finally, we will flip or make the second fraction into its reciprocal. And we've taken 2/3 now and we've exchanged the numerator and the denominator. To get the actual final answer, simply multiply across. So 4 times 3 equals 12, and 5 times 2 equals 10. Now, don't forget, you need to simplify your answers. Simplify before you multiply if you can. So let's take a look at that problem one more time. Again, we kept the first number, we changed to multiplication, and we flipped the second number. So before we multiply, we're going to simplify. 4 and 2, one number from the top and one number from the bottom, share a common factor of 2. If I divide 4 by 2, I get 2. If I divide 2 by 2, I get 1. Now I can multiply across. 2 times 3 is 6, 5 times 1 is 5, and you can leave it as 6/5. That is a perfectly acceptable answer, but it is also equivalent to 1 and 1/5 because there'll be one whole out of 6 pieces. I can make one whole, one group of 5. And I'll have 1 piece left over when I needed 5 to make another whole. You can leave your answer as an improper fraction or a mixed number, but you need to make sure you recognize both of them. simplify your answers. You can simplify after you multiply as well. So we're going to go back to that same problem. And we did all the math. We got 12 over 10. Well, we know 12 and 10 share a common factor of 2 because they're both even. If we divide by 2 on the top, we get 6. If we divide by 2 on the bottom, we get 5. So our final answer will be 6/5, which also is the same thing as 1 1/5. Remember that you can leave your answer as an improper fraction or as a mixed number. Just make sure you can recognize either one of them. Now it's your turn to try. We're going to do one problem together, and then I'm going to ask that you pause the video in between each question so that you can come back and see how the problems were done. So starting with question number 1. 2/5 divided by 2/3. Here's the original problem. Remember, we are going to keep the first fraction, which is 2/5. We're going to change from division into multiplication, and then we are going to flip over or find the reciprocal for the second fraction, which now takes 2/3 and makes it 3/2. Then we simply multiply across. 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 2 is 10. Now don't forget that you need to simplify your answer. So now that we have 6/10, we're going to divide the top and the bottom by the common factor of 2, and that leaves us with 3/5. That is our final answer. Keep in mind you can also simplify before you multiply. So 2 and 2, the 2 in the numerator and the 2 in the denominator, share a common factor of 2. So we can divide by 2 on the top and divide by 2 on the bottom, and then we can multiply across. In both cases, we'll still get an answer of 3/5. All right, now it's your turn. You try. Try problem number 2. Make sure you pause the video and come back to see the examples worked out for you. Here, we're going to keep the first fraction. We're going to change from division into multiplication, and we're going to flip or find the reciprocal of the second fraction, making it 2/1. When I multiply across, I get 6/10. Just so happens the same answer as the first problem. Remember to simplify your answer. So here we're going to take the 6/10, divide it by the common factor of 2 on the top and the bottom, and my final answer will be 3/5. Remember, you can also simplify before you multiply. The 2 on the top and the 10 on the bottom share a common factor of 2. So I'm going to divide 10 by 2 and get 5. And 2 divided by 2 gets me 1. So when I multiply across this time, I get 3/5 also. All right, now you try question number 3. 9/10 divided by 1/4. So we're going to keep the first fraction, that's 9/10. We're going to multiply, change the division into multiplication, and we are going to flip or find the reciprocal to 1/4, which is 4/1. Then we simply multiply across. 9 times 4 is 36, and 10 times 1 is 10. Don't forget to simplify your answer. We know that 36 and 10 share a factor of 2, so we divide by 2 on the top and the bottom, leaving us with 18/5, which can also be written as 3 3/5. Remember, I will accept either of those answers, but you need to make sure that you can recognize either of them if you're given a multiple choice question. You can simplify before you multiply by looking and seeing that 10 and 4 share a common factor of 2. So we'll divide by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. Then we can simply multiply across. We'll still get 18/5 or 1 3/5. Question number 4. You try. The problem is 3/8 divided by 9. I'm hopeful that you have paused the video and you're coming back to make sure you got it right. So we're going to keep the first fraction, which is 3/8. We are going to change from division into multiplication, and then we are going to flip or find the reciprocal of the last fraction. And 9 is not a fraction in its current state, but remember, every whole number can be made into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath it. So if it's 9/1, its reciprocal will be 1/9. Then we simply multiply across. 3 times 1 is 3, and 8 times 9 is 72. Don't forget to simplify your answer. So 3 and 72 share a common factor of 3. When we divide by 3 on the top, we get a 1. When we divide by 3 on the bottom, we get 24. So the final answer is 1/24. Remember, you can simplify before you multiply. 3 and 9 share a common factor of 3. If we take 3 and divide by 3, we get 1. If we take 9 and divide by 3, we get 3. Then we can multiply across, and we will still get 1/24. All right, now let's try question number 5. 10/11 divided by 5/6. First, we're going to keep the first fraction, which is 10/11. Then we'll change the division into multiplication, and then we will flip or find the reciprocal of the second fraction, which makes 5/6 into 6/5. Then we simply multiply across. 10 times 6 is 60, 11 times 5 is 55. Don't forget, you need to simplify your answer. So 60 and 55 share a common factor of 5. If we divide by 5 on the top, we get a 12. If we divide by 5 on the bottom, we get 11. So our final answer will be 12/11 or 1 and 1/11. Those are equivalent fractions, and both of them are acceptable answers, but you need to be able to recognize them both. Now you could simplify before you multiply. If you notice that 10 and 5, one number from the top and one from the bottom, share a common factor of 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2, and 5 divided by 5 is 1. Now when we multiply across, we instantly get 12/11, which is the same thing as 1 and 1/11. And that is the same answer we got if we simplified after we multiplied. All right, now you try question number 6. 5/9 divided by 13/9. Remember, we're going to keep the first fraction. That's 5/9. We're going to change from division into multiplication, and we're going to flip or find the reciprocal of the second fraction, which in this case will be 9/13. Then we simply multiply across. 5 times 9 is 45, and 9 times 13 is 117. Don't forget, we need to simplify our answer. And this is kind of a pain to simplify. So 45 and 117 share a common factor of 9. If I divide by 9 on the top, I get a 5. If I divide by 9 on the bottom, I get 13, and my final answer will be 5/13. Now I'm going to show you why you might want to simplify before you multiply, because it might make this problem a whole lot easier. Here's your example when you simplify before you multiply. So if you look at the two fractions, there's a 9 in both the top and the bottom. If we divide by 9 on the top, we get 1, and on the bottom, we get 1. And now when we multiply, it's simply 5 times 1, which is 5, and 1 times 13, which is 13. Those numbers are an awful lot easier to work with than 117 and 45. All right, you try. Question number 7. Remember to pause and come back to check your answer. Question number 7 is 1 3/4 divided by 7/8. We're going to keep the first fraction, but we need to change it into an improper fraction first. So remember, 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. That's where we got the 7 on the top, and we keep the denominator. Then we're going to change from division into multiplication. And then we're going to flip or find the reciprocal of the second fraction. So instead of 7/8, we now have 8/7. Then we simply multiply across. 7 times 8 is 56, and 4 times 7 is 28. Don't forget to simplify your answer. 56 and 28 happen to share a common factor of 28. When you divide by 28 on the top, you get 2, and on the bottom you get 1, and the final answer will then be 2, because remember, any whole number can be written as a fraction with a 1 as a denominator. So 2/1 is the same thing as 2. Now, we can simplify before we multiply. If you look, there's a couple of common factors that we can see in the numerators and the denominators. Let's start with the 7s. There happens to be a 7 in both the top and the bottom. If we divide by 7 on top, we get a 1. If we divide by 7 on the bottom, we also get a 1. Then we can know that 8 and 4 share a common factor of 4. If I divide by 4 on the bottom, I get 1, and if I divide by 4 on the top, I get 2. And now, since there's no other shared factors top to bottom, we can just multiply those numbers across. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 1 is 1, and the final answer is 2/1, which is the same thing as 2. Now you try question number 8. The problem is 3 divided by 1 1/8. Remember, we can't use 3 in its current state. We need to make it into a fraction, and any whole number can be kept as a fraction as 3/1. When you make a whole number a fraction by placing it over 1. Then we're going to change from division to multiplication. And then we're going to flip or take the reciprocal, find the reciprocal of the second fraction. Well, we can't do that until we change it into an improper fraction. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So we would have made that 9/8. When I flip it over, it becomes 8/9. Then I simply multiply across. 3 times 8 is equal to 24, and 1 times 9 is 9. Don't forget to simplify your answer. 24 and 9 share a common factor of 3. So when I divide the top by 3, I get 8, and the bottom, I get 3. And that is the same thing as 2 2/3, because 3 goes into 8 2 whole times, with 2 pieces left over when I needed 3 to make a third. We can also simplify before we multiply. 3 and 9 share a common factor of 3. So if we simplify by a factor of 3, 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Then, since we have no other common factors top to bottom, we simply multiply across. 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 3 is 3. And that gives us a final answer of 8/3, which is the same thing as 2 2/3. Remember, you can list your answer in either of those formats. Just remember that you've got to be able to recognize either of them as answers. You try our last problem, problem number 9. In this problem, we have 2 mixed numbers. We have to change them both into improper fractions before we can move on. So we're going to keep the first fraction. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11, so that becomes 11/3. We're going to change from division into multiplication, and we're going to flip or find the reciprocal of the second fraction. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 2 is 8. 8/3 becomes 3/8. Then we can simply multiply across. 11 times 3 is 33, and 3 times 8 is 24. Don't forget to simplify your answers. 33 and 24 share a common factor of 3. When I divide by 3 on the top, I get 11, and on the bottom, I get 8. 11/8 is the same thing as 1 3/8. And don't forget, we can simplify before we multiply. 3 on the top can be factored out with 3 on the bottom. They're both divisible by 3. When we divide by 3 on the top, we get a 1. When we divide by 3 on the bottom, we get a 1. And then we can simply multiply across. We're still going to get 11/8 or 1 3/8.